And welcome to the first um, introductory course on supply chain management. So this will be lecture 0 because this will be an introduction to this kind of a whole course, give you some moral and philosophical foundation. So from the next video onwards, we're actually going to go to regular lectures. So lecture 1 will be the introduction to the subject of supply chain management, and lecture 2 will start to talk about more in depth of this subject. So this is lecture 0 actually, because here I'm also talking about supply chain management, but the goal for today's video is to discuss a moral and philosophical principle of the subject of supply chain management in terms of leadership, in terms of customers, in terms of the whole process. So I want to welcome everyone who is listening to and watching this course right now, and thank you for your support in watching this this kind of a series on supply chain management. So let's get started with the goal of supply chain management. So the goal of supply chain management is to create value by providing products and services to the customers through optimally managing processes, resources, and capabilities. So we'll go through this definition in a more detailed way from the next lecture onwards. But basically, what I can tell is that process, resource, and capability are the three fundamental building blocks of supply chain management. So we have to learn a lot related to process and resources and capabilities in terms of how can we improve the process, resource, and capabilities in our supply chain. Okay, now let's get to leadership. For those of you who are starting this course, one of your direction in the future can be a leader. You can be a manager of the enterprise. You can be a manager or someone in charge of the managing of the supply chain management. So basically, everybody have to be equipped with a leadership skill. So the top leadership qualification is definitely important. We'll discuss in the next slide. And then we also have consumers leadership. You might be a bit concerned on what is consumers leadership. So basically, consumers leadership is consumers awareness of this kind of a business activities. Although consumers may not have a large effect, but consumers are actually stakeholders. If you study businesses, you know shareholders and stakeholders. Consumers actually can make an impact to the businesses if they have certain kind of empowerment. They actually can empower actions and shape actions taken by the businesses, and we will discuss this later on. And after this lecture 0, for all the lectures onward, we'll be discussing about supply chain management in a learning perspective. Why do I say learning perspective? Because you are here to learn. Although we are also practically applying this and talk about how different skills can be applied in supply chain management, but learning perspective is really important because I want everybody who is studying supply chain management, either in my course or in any courses taught by different teachers, what I want you to know is you have to put in conscious effort into learning, because learning is not a haphazard activity. Only if you put in effort to learn, then you can apply what you learn through these videos into real life practices. Because students exist in different types. If you only watch the video, it may not mean you are qualified for a job in supply chain management, because it really depends on how much effort are you putting in and how do you understand this concept, how well do you understand this concept, how well can you apply this concept in real world, in the real business world and market. So hopefully you can remember and keep this in mind. The whole course on this supply chain management is focused and have the focal point on learning perspective. That is a perspective to be exposed in this course. Okay, I mentioned I wanted to talk about top management leadership just now. So now, this is a requirement of a leader. So first of all, I'm putting a cube, a three-dimensional cube, because there's three leadership skills that leader must be equipped in order to be a top management leader and a leader in successful business. So first of all, leaders should have quantitative ability. So what does it mean? Because quantitative means it can produce results that can be measured by numbers. So for example, it can produce sales. They can generate high revenues for the businesses. Their products can be successful in terms of revenue, sales, and total gain. And then the leader also should have qualitative capability. This is basically how good quality how good quality they have in the business in terms of dealing with consumers, in terms of coordinating the departments, in terms of product development. And lastly, they also should have managerial and ethical capability, because not only quantitative and qualitative capability, or of the managers should have good ethics in work practices. They should have managerial practices. They have to have to be believers. They're willing to change something in the business world. So not only they should have quantitative and qualitative capability, They should also perform well ethics in the business and have a good managerial skill to kind of coordinate every department, to coordinate different employees in the business. So this is a leadership dimension. So now let's look at the 4 different squares. So leadership typology. So first of all, leadership have to equip with a critical mind to recognize problems. So why is it important? Because leadership, leaders are not going to be those fixed workers doing the same job every day. They have to identify the problems in the business. They have to make constant changes. They have to make quick and immediate actions. They have to take actions to help the business, and they also should have the action to change. Because if they only have the mind to recognize the problems and not change, there's nothing improvement. There's no improvements in the business. So either only one of these achieved is not enough. So if the leader is at this point, my mouse is pointing at if they have a critical mind but not taking any action, the business will die out very soon. If they have action to change but they don't have a critical mind, which means they're doing things but they are not really smart. Not smart, but they are not really thinking how to improve. They are only wanting to perform actions, but they are not putting effort into actually thinking the problems and tackle these issues. The business will die out very soon as well. If both ends are weak, I don't think that's a leader. That's not anyone. If someone has no critical mind and no motivation to perform any actions, that's not even a good employee. And the point that leader want to reach is this point here, the highest point, when they have a critical mind to tackle issues, recognize problems, and they have the action to change. So this is the point that eventually leaders want to meet. Now, what is the foundation of supply chain management implementation? I mentioned before, just now I talked about leadership, but now how about consumers' leadership, not managers' leadership? Consumers actually also have leadership. You might be a bit concerned, what is consumers' leadership? So consumers' leadership is basically consumers' empowerment and awareness. So let's take an example. If some company is producing a product that's not environmentally friendly, if consumers group together and to do an uprising in front of the office, it may take effect because consumers are part of a stakeholder. If consumers are putting too much pressure on the company actually will be forced to make changes, because otherwise the sales will even go lower than the existing low point. So basically, consumers' awareness can play an important part. Then we have active participation. So consumers can have active participation, and they have to be willing to take into account the sustainability when making a purchase decision. I mean, this is not really possible because when I go buy, for example, a packet of chips, I still buy the chips or buy the cookies, even though they are when I buy them, it's kind of I'm generating rubbish in this world. So what I say is when consumers take account of sustainability, such as environmental effects, and when they make a purchase decision, when they take account of sustainability, they may be able to make changes to the business when they add pressure to the business. But most consumers don't take this sustainability. For example, when I just mentioned now, if I buy a chip, I don't really care. I just want to eat it. I didn't really care about the rubbish I contribute to the world. Same thing when I buy a bottle of mineral water. And also when if I buy a car, you may contribute fuel, but I didn't really care because 90% of the cars are fuel power, but only maybe 5-10% is electrical energy power. So what it means, consumers, in order to contribute to a better world in the philosophical point of view, consumers' purchasing decisions can definitely shape the world, shape the products that companies develop. So now, can I leave a question in your mind? You can read here. So basically the question is, can I make a difference as a mere individual consumer against such a huge entity like a conglomerate and a government? So conglomerate refers to kind of a large multinational businesses, which can be Apple, Microsoft, Apple, Microsoft, IBM. So you can think of this question: if I'm just an individual consumer, I'm not doing anything in the business, but I'm a purchasing step in the business, can I really make a difference to the ethics or to the products of the conglomerates and the government? So can you please keep this question in mind, and by the end of this video we are going to answer this question. So here's the foundation of a supply chain management implementation. So how consumer leadership can take effect is shown in the diagram here. For example, if consumers are caring about the environmental issues and they're actually doing an uprising or kind of I would say kind of strike against businesses in terms of environment. They might force government to impose penalty on the manufacturer. They might force government to impose penalty on the retailer. Then the pollution can be abated, which means the pollution issues can be reduced. Because abate means to be reduced, because then more pressure is added, and companies are penalized for maybe releasing more carbon dioxide gas. So then they are afraid of releasing more because it'll be more costly. So they'll kind of control or use maybe solar energy power or wind energy power resources. The drawback is that maybe when a company do not apply fuel energy resources, they're actually getting less revenue, because first of all, the government have to definitely penalize them, so they will not have the courage to actually produce more products with fuel. And the second problem is that solar energy and wind energy nowadays in the 21st century right now still considered very expensive, because there's a higher technology requirement to obtain solar energy and wind energy to generate electricity for a production. So definitely when consumers leadership took effect in terms of, for example, the environment effect, companies may decrease in revenue, and that can lead to negative effects such as a lower employment rate. But overall, what I want to explain here is consumers leadership can really play a part as well. Not only managers leadership, but consumers leadership can really abate any issues in the world. In a philosophical point of view, they can reduce many issues happening in the world, and consumers are also able to kind of change the ethics of the business practices as well. So this is a takeaway I want you guys to understand. Now let's go to the learning perspective. So of supply chain management. So to approach supply chain management issues from the learning perspective, first of all, we have to understand the fundamentals of learning perspective. So we have to emphasize organizational learning and creativity. So when we learn in the organization to improve our processes, we have to take account of both team organization and learning, individual organization learning. Sometimes maybe it is more effective to work alone than to work a group. You might agree with this, because in school when you work in a group, people discuss about a lot of stuff. People may not be able to concentrate well, but in a business, learning have to be take part and to be effective in the group in order for the business to success. Because business is really interconnected. Even if the manager is really skillful and his employees are not well, the business cannot success. Then you'll be only a sole trader, a one-person business. Because for successful businesses like Microsoft, Apple, it's not only Steve Jobs or Tim Cook or Bill Gates are successful and skillful, their employees as well. Their CEO, their shareholders, their executives, their programmers, the supply chain managers as well have to be well skilled. So basically when we learn, we hope organization and team can learn effectively and understand mutually of different tasks from each other. Because if I only understand my task is not enough, I have to coordinate with people from other departments in order to combine our skills and work effectively. So organization learning and organizational kind of a group communication are essential in the business. Then in learning, in our third lecture, actually we'll be going through learning in a more deeper way, but like learning is basically also includes the process of identifying, analyzing, understanding the dynamic and complex causal, which is a cause and effect. Because when we learn, basically one important way we learn is basically trial and error. So in trial and error, what we do is basically we try to experiment with different kind of strategies or different processes, and we see the cause and effect. What will be the effects if we do this? It can be done in trial and error, and this can also be carried out through learning from other organizations. So that is about product benchmarking. So also we have to systemize knowledge from our cause and effect analysis. We have to also solve real-world managerial problems, and we have to learn from success or failure. Because when we work in a business, this is not only about supply chain management, but the business as a whole. We have to learn from our success or failure. When we success, we need to think whether this strategy can be applied to success again. And when we success, we should also tackle the issues, maybe the luck involved in this success, so we can avoid the issues that will occur if we apply the same thing that we succeeded to in the future. So we have to analyze both success and failure. Failure is definitely a really good opportunity for a business to analyze, to evaluate what can be achieved better in the future. And we have to assess and kind of evaluate our performances. And the goal is to continuously improve the knowledge, because learning is a constant activity. It's not like running 1 kilometer. After 1 kilometer, I stop. But learning is a lifelong goal. Everybody has to learn. No one has an endpoint of learning. Even if we pass away, even if we die, actually we haven't completed learning, because learning is unlimited. There are different ways to learn, and learning can never be finished. There are different fields of studies, there are different moral principles, and different methods, different strategies by different businesses. So learning can never be finished. So what we should do is to try to learn all the relevant or some comprehensive knowledge, and to kind of constantly keep this learning habit for yourself as well, and definitely importantly keep this learning habit for you and your employees in your business. That's definitely really important as well. And we have to reiterate, definitely to repeat this learning process. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the favorite. So I'm from China, so I'm going to talk about my favorite person in a kind of a philosophy, and this person's name is Confucius. The Confucius is basically a Chinese philosopher and scholar a long time ago. I think it's 230 BC or sometime like that. The Confucius taught 3 different ways for a human to learn wisdom. So the 3 different ways are, first of all, the first is through reflection, which is the noblest way. The second one is through imitation, the easiest way, and finally we have to acquire wisdom through our own experiences, which is the bitterest way. So if we change these 3 sentences into today's words, the first one is actually stimulation. So learn from experimentation is basically in supply chain management. This is about trial and error and cause and effect, because when we have to reflect, we have to see whether this strategy, whether this process had taken any effect. So we have to do our self-experimentation. And the second one, imitation, is basically product benchmarking, which is the process of us as a businessman and managers learning from other organizations in the market. See how other organizations are dealing with the same issues, are managing, are coping with processes and activities in supply chain management. And thirdly, own experience is the bitterest way, but it's a way that we can progress, because we learn from our failures. This part basically links to learning from our success and failures. It can be the bitterest way because when we fail, we might have to have a lot of responsibility on our back. We may have to pay back a lot of debt, definitely have to even cut down our salaries, make a lot of work redundant. So that's the bitterest way. But when we learn from our failures, there's a higher chance to success, because we practically know what is wrong, or we practically know what is right from real life business practices. So that can even work better than imitation. But imitation, which is product benchmarking, is definitely really important as well. We will go through this learning subject in our lecture 3, which will focus on learning capability. So please check the YouTube series for coming videos. Then learning from experiences. Now I want to give you guys an example, which is from Volkswagen. So we have you can check this article later on your own by typing this link, but I want to give you an idea of Volkswagen. Yeah, see, I want to give you an what happened in the 1970s of Volkswagen. So or 21st century. Sorry, in the 21st century, Volkswagen basically had some issues in their car, because their car didn't meet the standard of environmental safety, environmental friendliness. So Volkswagen, you guys all know, is a German vehicle company. So basically what happened in the 27 or 2010 was that Volkswagen's car has produced more pollution than what is legally acceptable by the government of the US, or also governments of Germany and other countries. So Volkswagen sales got a huge decline because the government saying, oh, your pollution, because consumers in many countries are aware of this issue. So consumers in maybe in Germany and consumers in United States started to buy less and less Volkswagen. So the Volkswagen sales in these countries decreased by a lot, because the consumers don't want to buy the cars that contribute a lot badly to the environment. So basically now this is linked to the consumer leadership I discussed just now, which I mentioned before. The actions and words of consumers can add pressure, so they can actually change the way of business activities. So after the huge loss of sale, what Volkswagen did is Volkswagen gave $100,000 payment to each car owners in the United States and Germany to compensate kind of their sadness. So they compensate what they experience as pollution. Maybe they get fined as well. So basically they gave a compensation. So as we can see from this case study, consumers in the US and Germany are quite aware of the environmental effect produced by their cars. But now, so that's about Germany and US and maybe other countries in North America or Europe. But now let's look at what is Volkswagen's response in Korea. You can also watch this. So Volkswagen did apologize in Germany and United States, but it didn't apologize in South Korea. Why is that happening? This is because South Korean customers were not really aware of the environmental effects. So when Volkswagen decreased the price, because on the rumor on the pollution, I mean the bad scandal on the bad news on the pollution issue, so they decreased the price worldwide. But when they decreased the price in South Korea, sales even went up in South Korea because customers only cared about the price. So it may not only happen in South Korea, it can be in China and other countries, but just an example. So basically, the customers in South Korea were not really aware of the environmental effect. They're only aware of the prices. So they don't care their Volkswagen vehicles will produce more pollution. Oh, the company decreased the price. Let's just go buy it. So Volkswagen sales actually experienced kind of landslide victory in South Korea after they decreased the price. In United States, it's like a 4, but in South Korea, basically it's rising fast because customers unawareness of this kind of environmental issues. And Volkswagen didn't really give the $1,000 compensation to Korean customers because Korean customers already satisfied with a low price and they are happy to buy the car. So there's no need to spend money on giving this $1,000 compensation to each car owner in South Korea. So what do we learn from this Volkswagen study at all? So basically, what we learn is that first of all, consumers are able to change the business activities of of the businesses. They can add pressure and they can actually change the way business activities are conducted, maybe and their products. So Volkswagen are not going to sell any pollution cars that break the laws of pollution, but also businesses can also be shaped by the unawareness of consumers. Like in South Korea, even though Volkswagen did apologize and did the morally right actions in Europe and America, but in South Korea, since consumers are not aware, means consumers didn't really have the leadership I discussed in the first slide. So then Volkswagen was really happy. Oh, if they didn't care, why do I have to compensate? Why do I have to change my business activities? So in Korea, the pollution issue didn't really change because the cars are still sold. So this means I'm not going to criticize whether businesses or everybody actually should not really criticize on whether a business is performed right or wrong, because since a business ultimate goal is to gain profits and revenues, their activities are hugely dependent on how customers react to different activities. If I'm the owner of Volkswagen and Korean customers are still buying my car and aiding my profits, I may not give the compensation because I don't feel that's necessary. And even if I give the compensation, they're still going to buy the car. They're even more happier to buy the car, and the sales are not going to drop. You're on the increase in South Korea. So this is this case study about Volkswagen. Yeah, see? Why? Because Korean customers are ignorant, they are selfish, I don't care about the environment as long as I can get a bargain. So this is their attitude. So now let's answer this question. Can a company behave ethically when there's no customer awareness? Very much unlikely. So like Volkswagen behave morally kind of ethically and in America and Germany because they have to consumers are really aware of this pollution issue, so their sales really got kind of a drastic drop. But in South Korea, since they do not care, customers are not really aware of these environmental consequences, so Volkswagen not behaving well, not behaving ethically right. So it's very unlikely for them to behave ethically right when there's no consumer awareness or awareness. Can we extend this logic I talked just now to nations? Yes. So let's now consider the two most heinous crimes against humankind. So the two now, after the Volkswagen study, we're going to discuss about the Holocaust by Hitler. This is our second case study, and the third case study will discuss the Japanese sex slavery. So I think you guys all know about Hitler and issue with the Holocaust. Basically, Hitler killed millions of people, millions of Jews, from by the German Nazis. And the Japanese sex slavery is basically a period of time when the Japanese men and the soldiers army sold the women for sex slaveries in other countries. So these are the two most heinous, most cruel crimes against humankind in our world history. You see, so first is Holocaust, and second is Japanese military sexual slavery. So what have these two countries done to remedy the false innocent victims to bear. So let's reword this sentence. So we're actually now investigating how did these two countries apologize to maybe those victims or the families of the victims, maybe to the citizens or to the offsprings of these victims. So let's know. So now the victim, innocent victim, now we refer to the Jews in our world today. Maybe they're in Jews, maybe I think mostly living in Europe. I would say living in like country like Israel. And secondly, secondly, the military sexual slavery. I refer to the victim of the children of those families, those parents involved in the sexual slavery, and those Japanese citizens, or those, I would say, the group of women and the group of women. So let's see how. I'm going to give you a verbal kind of explanation on how did Hitler how did this Holocaust go apologize. So basically, someone apologized to all Jews in front in Germany during a visit. I'm not sure the person's name, but actually it's a German kind of politician in the I would say in the 20th century. He actually knelt down in front of the plaza to which is a plaza to memorize the Jews killed in the Holocaust, and he actually knelt down and actually kind of asked for apologies. So that is basically. So this apology actually is quite a famous apologize in the world history, because he actually confessed the mistakes done by people in his families or all the Germans Nazis in the early generations to try to kind of restore their conscience and let them rest in peace when because they're all dead long before. So the goal is to let them rest in peace. And so this apology is kind of a popular and kind of acceptable apology by many Jews, by many victims of Jews nowadays. And the second apology is from the Japanese slavery. There's a different kind of apology, because during an interview, Japanese current Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was asked about his opinions on the sexual slavery. Basically, everybody is kind of expecting the interviewer is expecting a apology for Shinzo Abe related to the sexual slavery, but he didn't say. He said actually in his interview he denied the Japanese military sexual slavery to even happen in history. So this is two ways of responding. First way is some politician in Germany who knelt down to kind of apologize, and the second is Shinzo Abe, who denied what the cruel and heinous activity happened in history. So basically, the German Nazi, what he did was a true confession and repent, the German politician, because he wanted his fathers kind of to get a chance to be forgiven by their victims and to restore their conscience and rest in peace, and to also enable the children to get the chance to make peace with the world, because their children now know that, oh yeah, everything is kind of settled, although in history cruel things happens, but now someone apologized and some people accepted the apologize. So in the future, the children and the next kind of future generation can now work towards peace. But the denial, which denial in the philosophical and moral point of view, actually deprive the father the chance to be forgiven by their victim and to restore their conscience to rest in peace. So after we talked about both of them, should I criticize Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, for denying? No, we should not criticize, because I've talked about that just now. I mentioned about the customers' leadership is important. So basically, customers and how people react is really important on how a manager or how someone in the top position reacts. So in the Shinzo Abe case, he denied because he has to hold his position, because maybe many of the Japanese citizens do not agree with this kind of sexual or someone in his party, in Shinzo Abe's political party, denies this kind of a military sexual slavery thing to happen, or people in the government deny this to happen, people in the Japanese cabinet deny this to happen. So Shinzo Abe could not confess, saying that, I'm sorry, I apologize, because if he apologizes, he may lose power. This can be a severe consequence for a politician in the world. So the difference between whether I should apologize or deny is really dependent on how people react. So here, no is the people, right? So politicians behave exactly in the ways which are endorsed by the nation's people. Maybe the Japanese major, although morally people are wishing apology, but maybe the Japanese citizens do not think so. The Japanese citizens believe that apologies is not required. This thing actually didn't happen, It's just kind of conspiracy theory, this military whole slavery, sexual slavery kind of a scandal. It's just a scandal. It's not something that really happened. So basically, Shinzo Abe could not really apologize because he lost his power, lost his trust from his people, from his Japanese citizens. And another reason why people as conscious human beings and also consumers must be always aware, alert, ready to make moral decisions. So now let's return to the to the question we asked before. Can I make a difference as a mere individual consumer against such a high and huge entity like a conglomerate and a government? The answer is yes. You are more powerful than anyone you can imagine. Anyone can imagine, and you are more powerful than what you can imagine. Because as a customer, when you maybe buy shoes, when you buy a laptop, when you buy a cosmetic product like a body shop, like NS3, you are not really thinking of that you have the power to change how this kind of big business activities. But actually, yes, you are able to make changes. But you can make you can make an enormous difference to your value chain, ecosystem, to your society. Then it can be your country, the world, and mankind. As long as you are aware, alert, active, and willing to make a conscious choice as a consumer and also human being. So it is actually really possible to actually make changes to the businesses, even to conglomerates. So now this is the end of this lecture 0. So the short introduction. Now I want to give all you guys a few words. So I'm sure that after you study this course, you will be a better, you'll be a capable manager who appreciates the value of integrity. I hope you enrich your supply chain and value chain as well as your part of the world, because in the field, I hope everyone who completes this course not only will work kind of effectively, work smartly, and work later on in a high position in supply chain management, but I also hope you can contribute to the changes of this world, because you should believe in yourself that if you are aware, alert, and willing to change, willing is definitely really important. After you alert, you have to have a critical mind, and you have to be a believer. You should take action. Then you can actually change this world. Not as a customer, you may change this world as a CEO, as a politician, as a manager. You have plenty of opportunities in your future life. So everybody, good luck to your journey of learning. So this is lecture 0, and hope you can continue learning this supply chain course from our next lecture onward. Hope you can finish all the lectures in this series, because I'm also not a really expertise person in the fields of businesses, but the goal is to share, because in old Chinese sayings, people should learn from each other despite their age, despite their levels. We should learn from each other as long as someone has some knowledge that we have acquired, or someone has some understanding or moral principles that we haven't acquired yet. So maybe you, as my students, you are even more skillful than me in businesses. You might earn more money for a business and generate more value, but if you have not touched about supply chain management, I think it's valuable for you guys, and it's meaningful for you guys to attend these videos and to watch these videos and learn from me. And also, if you willing to share your ideas, I'm definitely really happy, and I'm looking forward to learn from you as well, because my goal is not only to teach you guys and discuss supply chain management, my goal is actually also to learn something from you. So good luck for you guys, and hope you have a bit of a moral and fundamental philosophical thought about this course and about the whole process of a customer and businesses. And good luck for your future learning in this course, Intro to Supply Chain Management. See you guys, and I'll see you in the next lecture.